Tell me that the left hasn't changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay.
The famous American comedian and political commentator Bill Maher continues to dismantle woke culture, making it clear that he's no longer holding back on his critiques. In a recent appearance on The View, he sparked controversy by sharing some particularly sharp opinions on the left and its transformation over the years. Maher, never one to mince words, emphasized how the once liberal values have morphed into something unrecognizable, especially in the realm of wokeness.
And so you can't really defeat that on the other side.
No, you can't. But before we go, I want to say...
No, we're not going anywhere.
No. Okay, but I just want to say one thing, because we were talking in the break.
Although the conversation started off with Whoopi Goldberg eagerly engaging, the room quickly grew tense when Maher touched on the sensitive topic of how much the left has changed. The comedian reminisced about a time when conservatives were seen as intolerant, particularly towards Jews, and he humorously contrasted that with today's progressive extremes. While it was meant as a joke, it illustrated a larger point. The left is no longer what it once was. His humor, however dark, didn't detract from the underlying truth he was trying to convey.
Woke is what was sort of ruining everything, and I know that you're...
No, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump...
Now, I'll use any term you want, because maybe that is a word that's triggering, and so let's not use that word. I don't know, want to call it the super far left, but don't tell me the left had...
The super far right. We talk about the left. Well, then
okay, but we talked about that. I mean, I think we agree.
In another recent interview, Maher clarified his stance on wokeness, a term that he admits might be misunderstood or overused. He defines it as a collection of ideas that often undoes liberalism rather than building on it. He even pointed out how, just a few years ago, Abraham Lincoln was widely celebrated by liberals, yet now his statues are being torn down, as though he's not good enough for the modern progressive movement. According to Maher, these actions exemplify how far some have drifted from traditional liberal values.
How do you define wokeness? Because I hear people use the term all the time and it means something different to everybody.
Well, again, I think it's this collection of ideas that are not building on liberalism, but very often undoing it. I mean, 5 years ago, Abraham Lincoln was not a controversial figure among liberals. We liked him. Now they take his name off schools and tear down his statues. Really? Lincoln isn't good enough?
But the boldest claim came when Maher discussed the biggest threat to society. Despite his critiques of the woke left, he maintains that the far right poses an even greater danger. While many might expect him to relentlessly attack the left, Maher is clear. The extreme right is a much more pressing issue.
But we talked about that. I mean, I think we agree about the danger of the super far right, and I can't say it enough. I think they're the bigger threat. But don't tell me that the left hasn't changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a joke. But
see how quiet everyone got when he said it?
Throughout various interviews, including one with Ron DeSantis in 2023, Maher reiterated his disdain for woke culture, explaining that it often goes too far and alienates many, even within liberal circles. His frustration isn't just with the ideas themselves, but with the way they manifest, especially in places like schools, where he believes crazy stuff is happening.
I'm fed up with woke too. That's why I have trouble with friends in Hollywood. I'm an old school liberal, and that's a whole different thing than woke. And I'm sympathetic to you because, you very often take on an issue where I feel like, yeah, there is crazy stuff going on in schools. There is crazy stuff. But the problem is, it doesn't resonate with a lot of people who don't see it or whatever. But there's a reason why the term woke has come to signify going too far and doing things that don't make sense.
As he demonstrated on The View, Maher believes that wokeness, especially when it involves senseless protests, such as college students waving Hamas flags, reflects a dangerous and misguided direction.
Sure, I mean, if I had any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left, watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas, that straightened me up pretty quick.
Bill Maher has long been a vocal critic of woke culture, never shying away from expressing his views, particularly when it comes to exposing what he sees as its contradictions. On his show, Real Time with Bill Maher, he frequently dismantles what he perceives as the woke movement's preference for narrative over truth.
World when truth conflicts with narrative, it's the truth that has to apologize. Being woke is like a magic moral time machine where you judge everybody against what you imagine you would have done in 1066, and you always win.
As Maher puts it, when the truth comes into conflict with the woke narrative, It's the truth that has to apologize. He likens the woke mindset to a moral time machine, where individuals imagine how they would have acted heroically in historical situations, always emerging as the moral victor. In his view, this approach distorts reality, and the woke culture consistently places its own ideals above facts, especially when the two are at odds.
Let me tell you, if you're for Hamas, just live in Gaza for a day. And I'm not talking about while the war is on. I mean before the war. But trust me, you would go running and screaming and begging to live in Tel Aviv.
Maher's critiques, however, go beyond abstract cultural trends and dive into real-world issues. When the topic of Hamas and terrorism came up, Bill made his stance crystal clear. If you support Hamas, try living in Gaza for a day. Before the war even started, he argued, you'd be begging to live in Tel Aviv. He framed the question of Hamas in stark terms. Does Hamas need to be destroyed?
Now, this is a war. Do you think Hamas needs to be destroyed? This is the question.
Yeah.
You do?
Yes.
So how
Okay, well,
with a ceasefire?
All right, so Hamas needs to be destroyed because they are a terrorist organization who say openly that they want to commit genocide on the Jewish people, on the state of Israel. That's what from the river to the sea means.
Sure.
Bill's response was unequivocal. Hamas is a terrorist organization that openly calls for the genocide of the Jewish people and the destruction of Israel. He emphasized the significance of the phrase "from the river to the sea," which he interprets as a call for the erasure of Israel, leaving little room for ambiguity about their intentions.
So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that.
But while Maher's moral clarity on Hamas was firm, he acknowledged that the solution to the conflict isn't as simple as stating Hamas needs to be eradicated. When he posed the question, "How do we do that?" the room fell silent, with no one able to offer a straightforward answer. This moment revealed a deeper truth. While many people have strong opinions about international conflicts, crafting a practical, actionable solution is far more challenging. Even Bill, known for his decisive opinions, admitted that he didn't have a clear answer to this complex issue, underscoring the limitations of debate when faced with real-world crises.
Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
Bill's critique wasn't limited to terrorism and international conflicts. He also took aim at the media, highlighting its role in shaping public perception. He and guest Whoopi Goldberg agreed that the news often presents a one-sided narrative that seems designed to guide viewers toward specific conclusions, rather than offering the full picture. Whoopi pointed out that when watching the news, you're often only getting pieces of the story, designed to lead you to think about events in a particular way. Bill echoed this sentiment, lamenting that news today often feels more like, "Here's some video we found that's fun to watch," rather than substantive reporting. For Bill, this focus on sensationalism rather than facts is part of a larger problem: the media's preference for narrative over truth.
I have a question for you, because I don't know if you noticed what I've noticed, but I find that oftentimes when I'm watching the news, I'm only getting portions, because one of the things that happens, I was listening to you talk about, the kids that had the Hamas flags. It reminded me of when people were saying Antifa is there, and doing it. So bad players show up and make stuff happen. But do you find that the view that we're being shown seems to be meant to guide us into thinking about people one way, when in fact it may be a much bigger conversation?
This distrust of modern media, Maher suggested, has affected his ability to engage with people who rely heavily on the news for their opinions. He noted that, for some reason, it's difficult to take them at their word given how selectively the media presents information. It's not like when I hear people talk on either side of it, I always think they're lying. They're just telling me half of it. Bill's criticism of the media was scathing, but he wasn't finished there.
I mean, I used to be able to watch the nightly news, for example. I can't do it. I mean, first of all, it should be called, "Here's some video we found that's fun to watch." That's not the news.
Yeah.
Like anything that happens on a plane. Like the plane skidded off the runway, so what? Call me when anybody died, and it's not, the door fell off. Okay, I'm sorry.
Turning to politics, Bill discussed how today's society has become increasingly tribal, a dynamic he believes is dangerous. He identified 4 primary tribes in modern politics: old-school liberals, to which he still aligns himself; old-school conservatives, a shrinking group, and 2 other more extreme factions that often dominate the cultural landscape today. According to Maher, the divide between traditional liberalism and the modern woke movement is stark. He used the example of homelessness to illustrate this point. In the past, liberals approached homelessness with compassion, believing in getting people off the streets. The woke perspective, however, seems to romanticize the situation, treating homelessness as if it were an acceptable lifestyle choice that should be preserved.
You know, it's just nothing.
Yeah.
And it's narrative over truth. You know, I mean, it's not like when I hear people talk on either side of it, I always think they're lying. They're just telling me half of it.
Maher insists that he hasn't changed. Rather, it's the world around him that has. "I still think we should get these people off the street," he said, underscoring his belief that compassion should drive efforts to help the homeless. In his view, this represents the traditional liberal stance. The fact that this perspective is now considered outdated or conservative speaks volumes about how much the political landscape has shifted. Maher also touched on President Biden, arguing that the media often overlooks his accomplishments because they aren't sensational enough to hold public interest. He fixed the infrastructure, he improved the economy, but none of that is exciting enough to make headlines, Bill noted. For Maher, this focus on what's flashy rather than what's important is emblematic of the media's broader failure to inform the public meaningfully.
It's the reason I think that we don't know about Biden's accomplishments, because it's too boring to say he fixed the infrastructure, he fixed the economy. No one wants to, and they know that, you know, who's going to make.
Finally, Bill revisited the term woke itself, tracing its origins to the black community, where it was initially used to denote awareness of social injustices. "Why is that a bad thing?" Bill asked, acknowledging that the original meaning of the word was a positive one. Being alert to injustice is, after all, a good thing. But he also argued that words migrate, and that woke has evolved far beyond its original context. What was once a call for awareness has, in Bill's view, become a cultural force that often stifles open dialogue and imposes rigid ideological conformity. Perhaps no comment summed up his critique of woke culture better than when he said, "Maybe the girl who hates girly stuff just needs to learn that being female doesn't mean acting like a Kardashian." For Bill, the solution to many of today's societal issues doesn't lie in drastic ideological shifts, but rather in encouraging people to see beyond the narrow boxes imposed by both the woke left and the conservative right.
Maybe the girl who hates girly stuff just needs to learn that being female doesn't mean you have to act like a Kardashian. Maybe childhood makes you sad sometimes, and there are other solutions besides hand me the dick saw.
In conclusion, Bill Maher remains a steadfast advocate for truth, taking a firm stand against what he sees as the overreach of woke culture and media manipulation. His critiques reveal not just the contradictions in today's dominant narratives, but also a shared frustration with the gap between what is presented in the media and what's actually happening. While Maher identifies as an old-school liberal, his views increasingly reflect a sharp critique of the narratives that distort reality. From his firm stance on Hamas and the war in Gaza to his reflections on how the term woke has been co-opted and lost its original meaning, Maher demonstrates that society's complex problems cannot be solved by simplistic labels or ideological rigidity. Ultimately, Maher's message is clear. Beyond political opinions and tribal affiliations, truth should always prevail, even if it means challenging those who once seemed to be on our side. His approach serves as a call to return to honest, less dogmatic conversations that allow for open dialogue, where the truth doesn't have to apologize for making people uncomfortable. With that in mind, we leave you with this question. What do you think about Bill Maher's views? Do you agree with his analysis of today's culture and media landscape? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next video.